What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to this new video where we will be going over what is going on in the Premier League up until the international break. Now let's go right ahead and talk about the top of the table. If I'm being honest, there's not really much to talk about at the top of the table because once again, it is Liverpool and Manchester City. Now, we saw it all last year. Liverpool and Man City were miles ahead of everyone else, not just in terms of points, but also just in terms of quality of play. They were consistent in the way that they played. Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola had their game plans set out from the beginning of the season and they executed it to almost perfection. Now we look at Manchester City. They are 2 points back of Liverpool, and from this point forward we can still expect that battle at the top of the table to continue. Now if we move a little bit further down the table, we have Arsenal. Now, in my opinion and in many people's opinion, Arsenal's struggles could have been predicted before the season even started. We go and we look at their back line. Now, they tried to make that late transfer move for David Luiz right at the end of the transfer window, but as we've seen thus far in these first 4 games, it has not solidified their defense at all. Now, this is partially due to the fact that they have injuries at the back, like their new signing Kieran Tierney, but it still leaves a gap wide open at center back because Socrates and David Luiz have yet to find chemistry with each other, and honestly they both have similar attributes which are causing Arsenal problems. Now we can go ahead and talk about both of them, but the major problem is still David Luiz. In my opinion, he has been overrated for the past 5 years, and it has really come to the point where the skills that he had before no longer will do it for a top tier Premier League side. Now, David Luiz is not the only issue with Arsenal. Hopefully they can get Hector Bellerin and Tierney back soon. They are expected to be back in training by late September, so hopefully this will solidify their back line. Although Maitland-Niles is one bright spot for Arsenal this season so far. Aside from that, Arsenal have still taken 2 wins out of their first 4 games, and they did come back to tie Tottenham at home. Now, I still do think that there is trouble for Arsenal lying inside of their midfield. I do not think Granit Xhaka holds down that defensive midfield spot well enough. His passing accuracy and his decision making on the pitch is not the decision making that Arsenal need to feed the front 3. It seems like Unai Emery has been playing around with lineups for the first few games, and he's trying to figure out the best striker partnerships and the best midfield partnerships. I do think Guendouzi will hold down that midfield spot, and I hope to see the creativeness of Ozil and Ceballos come back into the lineup in order to solidify that Arsenal midfield. Now, I'm not sure if Unai Emery will stick with the front 3 throughout the rest of the season, because it seems as though Aubameyang is more comfortable at the striker position. But in the last game against Tottenham, he did line up on the left side with Lacazette playing the center forward role. We'll have to see how that pans out as the season goes on. Now let's move on to a heartbreaking one for me, really ripping on the heartstrings. Let's talk about the struggles of a Manchester United. Now, they've taken 1 win out of their first 4 games, and it was that 4-0 win against Chelsea to start the season off. And I feel like Manchester United fans after that first game had some sort of hope. For me as a Manchester United fan, it was a cautious hope because I somehow knew that it could prove to be a positive spring into the new season, but also knew that probably wasn't going to be the case. They dropped points against Palace, against Southampton, and against Wolves. So now let's break down a little bit of Manchester United's struggles in my opinion. First and foremost, I do feel like there is a lack of chemistry on the pitch. I don't know whether this is because the 3 new signings have been tossed in to the starting 11, there definitely is some sort of disconnect between the front four, I will say the number 10 in Lingard, and the back six. And it seems as though United are not quick to transition from defense to offense, which is kind of disappointing to me because they have large threats up front. So they have pace up front, and it seems as though because they are not quick to transition from offense to defense, or from their back, moving it out of their back line into the 10 who can then play through the front three, it just seems too slow for me. And that seems like the characteristic Manchester United we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years. So I'm hoping that this is something that gets fixed. I'm hoping that we see more attacking threat, and I hope that we see a little bit more team cohesion as the season goes on. Let's move on from this and talk about Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace had a terrible first 2 games. They had not scored a single goal, but they are in 4th position right now thanks to their 2 wins after their first 2 horrific games. Now, the first win was against Manchester United, and they very much held their own in that game, and they countered with a late winner from Patrick Van Aanholt. And their last win was their game against Aston Villa. Now, I still think they don't pose enough of a threat going forward, and I would love to see Benteke and Zaha and even Townsend come into the team, because I do believe that that is a quality front 3. Now, before we move on to some mid and bottom table teams right now that might be surprising to you all, I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about Tottenham and Chelsea. Now, Chelsea started off the season with that dreaded 4-0 loss to Man United, in which they seemed to lack character in the second half. I don't know if it was because in the first half they couldn't finish, and from that point on they lacked confidence to even pose a threat to Manchester United in the second half. But in all honesty, I do not think Chelsea look bad. I do think there are many positives to take out of their first 4 games this season. Now, we can criticize their squad, their lack of depth in their squad, but I do think the young players that they have brought up to come play at the start of this season have really given a spark to this team and have given a little bit of hope to Chelsea fans who maybe didn't have that much hope. Now, of course, there are issues in the team, for example, their defensive line, and honestly, I think once Rudiger comes back, it will solidify the defense a little bit, but that will just have to be something that Chelsea live with and work through for the rest of the season. Getting rid of David Luiz was not the worst thing for their backline anyways. Now, continuing into the midfield, they do have N'Golo Kante injured at the moment, who will lock down that defensive midfield position, which will hopefully allow Jorginho to be a little bit more creative and hopefully feed their strikers. Now, in order for Chelsea's season to go positively, I do believe because of the lack of depth, they will have to avoid injury. Sadly, that might be a key to their season. But it'll also be relying on the young players coming through. So we have yet to see Pulisic find form. We are starting to see Tammy Abraham find form. And Mason Mount has already proved that he can be a quality center attacking midfielder with a goal threat. So we will also be looking for the experience of Willian to come through, because in the past seasons we have seen Willian be a huge threat, and he is a very skillful player that will provide assists and goals for this Chelsea squad. Now, I know people are saying they don't know if their youngsters are ready yet, but really they have nothing else to rely on. And I believe that Tammy Abraham has proved that he can be a goal-scoring threat, not only through these first 4 games, but when he was in the Premier League with Swansea, he was a dynamic goal scorer. He also proved it in the Championship, so we'll just have to see if he can continue his form playing for a top side that is looking to get into the Champions League like Chelsea. Now let's take a quick look at Tottenham, because it's a very interesting one for me, at least, because there's big speculation of players wanting to leave. You've got Eriksson who wanted to leave, and you've got Vertonghen who wanted to leave. And personally, I think it's a little bit blown out of proportion, and their season hasn't started off so well. And honestly, I think a large part of that is because Vertonghen didn't play and Christian Eriksen wasn't starting. Those are big name players that have been key to their last few seasons. Now, we saw Jan Vertonghen and Christian Eriksen both start in the game against Arsenal, which did start off very well for the Spurs. Now, I think Christian Eriksen needs to be in this team because Spurs have not made many transfers in the past 2 years. They have not beefed up any of their attacking options, and they have in fact lost their backup striker to Harry Kane, Fernando Llorente. Now, if you think about their options going forward, you have Eric Lamela, who has seen a ton of playing time in the first bit of the season, and you have Son Heung-min, who has not seen any playing time in the first 3 games due to his match ban. Going forward in the January transfer window, I do think that Tottenham, in order to compete for the top 4 spot, they will need to strengthen their front in numbers. I would also like to see Lucas Moura get a lot more playing time. With his pace and his ability up front, I believe he'll be a true threat. For me, Sheffield United have been one of the standout teams. Now, of course, I cannot watch every single Premier League game that goes on, but I do watch bits and pieces, and Sheffield United have really looked solid so far. And honestly, Sheffield United look really organized as a team, who also have a threat going forward in their recent record signing purchase of Oliver McBurney. And they seem to have a formation that really works for them, with their 3 at the back and their wing backs. In addition to this, because of their organization, they're giving top teams trouble, and they're keeping all the games close, giving themselves a chance to win. Now, for me personally, at the bottom of the table, I'm looking at Aston Villa and Wolves. One we might have expected and one we might not have expected. Now, the reason I say I expected Aston Villa to be at the bottom of the table is due to the amount of purchases they made over the transfer window. They made 12 transfers for a team that just got promoted from the championship. It seemed a little outrageous to me, but watching them play, it didn't seem too out of whack. It looks like they will have issues scoring going forward, so they will need to sort that out. Their new number 9 just scored his first goal, I think, in the 3rd game of the season. So they'll have to sort that out going forward. Now, the Wolves have actually started off their season winless in the first 4 games. They do have 3 draws, however, and they haven't faced the easiest of sides. Burnley, who are having an alright start to the season, with Ashley Barnes getting off the mark well, and coming up against Manchester United, who are coming off that 4-0 win. And then they had to face the likes of Leicester in a 0-0 draw, and they had to face Everton, who were coming off a rough first 3 games, and they were looking to bounce back at home at Goodison. So not the easiest of 4 games for Wolves, but their struggle has been scoring again. We haven't seen that deadly partnership of Diogo Jota and Raul Jimenez up front like we saw last season. So hopefully going forward, they will look to put in some goals. As for this video, that's all for now on your Premier League roundup for the first 4 games of the season at this international break. I will look to be doing more of these videos as the season goes forward, but so I don't have so much to talk about in just one video, I will be looking to do them weekly recaps of every single Premier League game. Of course, I can't watch every single minute of every single Premier League game, but I will do my best to stay on top of it, providing you guys with all the updates you need to stay up to date with all of the Premier League matches, all of the top stories, and all of that good stuff. As for now, that's all from me, and until next time, Rookie, over and out.